Hey up everybody and welcome back. Right then, I'm sitting here amongst the stable. There's only the other greaves which is still in the paint room because I don't have all that much space out here. So anyway, just to sort of finish off on the last few weeks, Greaves is running beautifully. I was out riding it again yesterday. I have a couple of little bits which are always very tricky and I managed them on this. I'm really happy with this. Triumph, not smoking at all, running beautifully. That OKO carb has completely cleaned the carburation up, runs like a train. B44, I've been starting that and ridden it around a couple of times and the kickstart seems to be working fine. I don't think it's stuck, but I'm still not happy with the engine. I get asked about, when I put different pistons in, I get asked about balance factor, because some people think the balance factor, if you get the right balance factor, you don't have any vibration. That's wrong. The balance factor just moves in the rev range where the vibration is, and maybe with this Honda piston in, I've moved it right down to virtually tick over, because this feels quite smooth to ride, just pottering. That I don't like. So anyway, but maybe next winter we'll strip that motor and have a look at it. Other than that, that work's all done. I'll just mention something now which I don't think there'll be any point in mentioning it because of where I live, but really this year I've got to get this B50 sold, the one with the disc brakes and electronics and everything. And the other thing is, I've been tidying up. I've got tons of stuff which I will never ever use. Things like BSA hubs, because I always put different wheels in. I've still got some frames and forks and headlamp shells, and I can see it all ending up in the scrap. So if there's anybody within a reasonable distance who wants to come and either get it or pick through it, they're welcome. But I honestly don't, it's the sort of stuff that, like frames. How often do you need to replace a frame? Virtually never. So, but anyway, the stuff is here if you want. Alright, what else? I thought of what we're going to do as a project, so let me take you over there and we'll have a look at that. So the obvious thing to build something with is this Sammy Miller Highboy frame. And thanks again for this, this was quite a gift. Alright, so as I mentioned, originally it had a Bultaco engine in, and I think I'm right in thinking, I meant to look it up actually before I started doing this video, I think he did this for the Honda engine as well. Because don't forget, Sammy Miller was instrumental in the Honda Trials bikes, TLs, which funnily enough were never that good. So, as I mentioned, it has been in a fire, which hasn't done it any harm from what I can see. But then it's just been standing, so it's got some rust on. This is rusty. These front mountings could well be the original ones, but they've been re-welded on. I'll show you when we get round to this, but this has got the most beautiful bronzing. I mean, it's as if, it's like you put a layer of bronze in, and while it was still soft, you went with a little scribe and did absolutely perfect little semicircles all the way down. It's gorgeous. This is real, as they call it, chicken shit welding. I mean, it's lumpy, it's horrible. So we'll take those off. Right, now then. So it's got its chain tensioner with it, it's got this. So what do we need to do with it? I'm going to show you something else in there. It's the only other piece of damage, if you like. It's even got, on the swinging arm here, some of its original, and down here, some of its original nickel plating. But anyway, we've got to find an engine to put in it. But also we've got to think about other things. So I think I have a Tiger Cub rear hub, which also I was very generously given by a viewer. And I would like to use that because having the rear brake lever, we can have a rod, make things a lot easier to the back wheel, because the brake drum will be on this left hand side with the Cub. Whereas if I use the TY250 rear wheel that I've got, which actually doesn't weigh much different, I don't think, and the Cub rear brake actually works well. That would have the brake shoe on the brake plate on the other side, so we'd have to start faffing around with the cables or whatever. So Tiger Cub hub in there. Now then, this is sitting on this great big bash plate, and if we take the tabletop as being, because the bash plate's on, the height it is from whatever, we can gauge how much ground clearance we'd get, because the rear spindle is virtually down here, and we know that front and rear wheels, 18x4 tyre on the back, 21x3 or 275 on the front, gives us about 13 inches to the wheel spindle, right? So here, if the wheel spindle's touching the table and that's touching the table, that means this bash plate's going to be about, certainly in comparison with that, 13 inches off the ground. The other thing I have checked is this headstock is 6 inches. Headstock on a B44 is 6 inches. So those B44 forks that I prepped for the greaser, you know, which have new bushes and gaiters and oil seals and new chromed oil seal holders, we could probably put them in there with either the original B44 yokes, or with the alloy yokes we've got to see about them, because the offset's different. So the other thing we could check here is virtually all the forks I've used are 30 inches long. So if we again using the, I really have got to keep tidying up, I've got rubbish all over. What I tend to do is tidy up by putting it in a box, and then I end up with lots of little boxes full of, you know, nuts and bolts, and that's got spokes in it and all sorts of things, little bits of alloy cut out. Anyway, what was I doing? Oh yeah, so there's a magnet on the end of this. So if the forks are out here slightly at that angle, that's 28 inches. So that front would be up a little bit. So we would have lots of ground clearance with only 13-inch pair of rear suspension units. So that all looks good. So what have we got for engine? Well, we've got, where the cylinder would be, I don't know, 17 inches, which is less than the BSA. (14 inches, which I think is about the BSA size. But I'm just using that as a bit of comparison. But let's say if this is going to be 13 or a little bit more, we could drop this an inch without any problem. And you see the way that, hang on, can you? Yeah. You see the way this great big plate is here. I was looking at that and I thought I could actually, across there, bend that down a little bit, and then the bash plate would go down, and we could, here we'd just put a spacer under it or fold the bash plate back up. So we could probably put the B44 forks in the front, get another TY250 wheel, because I've already got wheel spindle spacers and everything made up if we use those yokes. cub hub in the rear, that's the front end. I'd have to buy a rim and spokes for that. I actually sat, hold on one second, excuse me. This was just as an experiment. I really should use this sometime. I've had it sitting around for ages. See, that is quite nice, except it just needs to be wider at the back, sitting on these frame tubes. Now, the one thing I am not going to do, apart from maybe bending that a little bit, is modify this frame at all. So, I don't know. Let's see, I mean, it fits on nicely. Or we'll just simply make an alloy tank for it. Of course, I don't know how much space there'd be. That would probably mean the engine's got to be lower using this one. Just as a side note, of course you couldn't, this is a US model one, so it's actually the tank. In the UK, this was just a cover, because of course after the 60s and all the cafe racer road crashes with fiberglass tanks, where the rider survived the crash and got burnt to death because the tank split open. You know, in the UK you can only have metal, or I guess, I don't know if they allow plastic rather than fiberglass, but it used to be just metal. So in the UK, the Montesas were sold with an alloy tank, and then this was just a cover that went over it. So anyway, it's a thought, but I fancy having to go to another alloy tank. So what do we do about engines? Well, it's funny you should mention that. I had almost forgotten this, but about 15 years ago I was given this by a friend. He'd keep giving me things, and I put it to one side, and then actually when I built the little shed out the back, I put it in this big plastic bag so that I could put it out there and it wouldn't get damp. So let's have a look, see what we've got in here. I think that'll come off. Will it? Yeah. No. Oh yeah. Fold that up so I don't cut my finger off. I'll tell you what, this was heavy to carry in. I'm getting old. One Honda 250 engine, complete with carb even. Oh, that's a bit of a hefty carb. I think we can do better than that. Right, now then, one of the reasons in the past I've never looked to using Japanese 4-strokes are dimensional issues. I just stood up, there we go. I had it resting. Is that overhead cam adds a bit to the head, but more often than not, wet sump. I presume this is wet sump. Actually, don't tell me this is a dry sump engine. Oh no. Well, that could be just for the clutch. What does it say on that? Use SAE 1040. I was going to say that having a wet sump and the overhead cam tends to make them very tall. So what were we looking at? 17 by 14. Well, it's only 13 inches long from front to back. It's 18 inches. If we put that in slightly at an angle like that, how tall would it be? Well, actually it's only 17 and a half maybe. Presume that's a 5-speed. Yeah, it's a 5-speed gearbox. Points are up here on the end of the camshaft, and it's not particularly wide. I've noticed some engines, some of the Japanese engines as well, the generator they have on them is enormous, so they're really wide at the front. So we'd have to see, oh, there's a grease nipple there, which is probably for this clutch mechanism. There's only 3 wires coming out of there. I'm not even sure which engine this is. It's a 250, it says 248 cast in there. It's an older engine. I don't know if it's out of an XL or something. See, that's the other thing. Well, we come to a number of things. The dimensions were one thing. The other is having an overhead cam with a chain to drive it means you can't just slap a compression plate underneath the cylinder to lower the compression. You might get away with a bit, I suppose, because they always have a tensioner, so there might be enough leeway to just move it up slightly. I don't know. But anyway, that's a possibility. So I'm going to take the bash plate off this and we'll see if the frame will go around it, around the engine. Before we try this, I'll show you the one piece of damage there is here. Strange, I don't know what's caused this, but you can see that's rusted right through there. See there, look? Look at that bronzing. That is so beautiful. Wish I could do that. I wonder if that was gas. With one of those... you can get a gas torch for doing bronze. Charlie Prescott bought one. That introduces the flux, I think they call it a fluxer, into the gas flame. Bit like a power washer, having one of those things that picks up, sucks up the soap and sprays it with the power wash, so that the flux goes directly on with the flame as you're heating the metal up before you put the rod on. But anyway, we've got a hole there. So what I was thinking with this is, as I said, we have the problem of different types of bronze. This is almost certainly Sith bronze, I would think, from the age of the bike. Is I'm going to cut this off. I'm hoping this is just thick enough, just above the bronze. Cut it out like that. Then we'll weld it in, and in the back I'll put a nice thick bronze to the tube, because you know you've got the other side and you've still got plenty of gusseting round this. The other interesting thing was when I took the bolts out, these frames are from what, the late 60s, I guess. They were with bolts. So let's try this round this engine. Can't get you at a much better angle because the welding table is in the way. Let me cut these front mounts off, because as I say, we're going to cut them off anyway, but they're all that seems to be catching, so let me just cut them off. Just thought I'd show you this. There's the welding. I mean, God, But look at those, there's the plates I cut off. That's nearly rusted away on that side. Alright, let's move on. Right, I've moved you around a bit. I hope I don't get in the way too much. You know what I think that is? Oh no, it's a drive. I thought it was a decompressor cable. But I think it's a rev counter drive. Which would tend to mean it's probably not an XL. I don't know if they had rev counters anyway. The other thing I've just noticed moving this is this frame is actually quite heavy. Considering that, let's say, all the tubing is smaller diameter than I would use, and all the plate is 1/8 inch. Right, so what's that catching on? Oh, actually it's catching on. That I put in there. I need to find something else to support the engine. Hold on. There you go. It does fit in. I've put a 1/2 inch under, hang on, I can't get you all that way back. Alright, I've put a 1/2 inch under here and about 3/4 inch under there, but that front one doesn't matter, that's about the way. So that engine's down flat. Excuse me. That's actually measuring just less than 13 inches, so this would be up a little bit from what we originally had. So we would get plenty of ground clearance. Carburettor's awkward to make a turnaround for seeing that. The exhaust is close to the down tube, but nothing to worry about. Of course, we're going to have the brake and the gear change on the same side, which is I must admit, I don't like. But it does fit in. Let's say I don't want to alter anything. I could put new engine plates on this front. I don't think you can see around here. There's a single mount there. There's 2 mounts at the back. Now I don't want to cut these plates off, but I was just looking at it and thinking, and they are 1.1/8 apart. I could get a piece of box section that would slide down in there, bolt into both of these, so it would literally be like a little extension of the frame with plates top and bottom to mount that on. There isn't a top mounting, but there are 2 things here which look as if they are threaded. And of course I could make one off these head bolts, put some longer head bolts in and make a plate to come up triangular to go on there. So I would say that this engine will fit alright in that frame. The only awkward part I can see is the carburettor. Hang on, I've got to keep checking how much you can see. I'm going to move you up slightly. Hold on a second. Get ready. We could do a tank like we did on the Triumph one. It actually goes down a bit. So we have a certain amount of volume up here and then a certain amount of volume down there because, excuse me, we'll put this on, although we won't use this because it's enormous and tall. Fuel would go in there, you see. God, why is that so high up there? What did this engine come out of? You know, I've got a feeling this maybe didn't come out of a bike. Wonder if this is out of an early Honda four-wheeler. Because that would never go in a bike frame. I mean, even if it was the Honda frame, it would only be up here somewhere. I mean, look at it. That is weird, the way that carburetor sticks right out there and is so high. So we might have to do something really clever with that. Do away with these. We'll have to come up with some sort of ignition. I mean, I could maybe use that, I don't know. This might have a flywheel generator, but just with points. We could use that. I mean, I prefer to have some electronic ignition. Splines look alright on that. There, of all the differences in Japanese engines to like BSAs and Triumphs, there's the one thing I really love. You want to change the sprocket? You take a circlip off and the sprocket comes off. BSA, I mean there's a cover there, but it's a dry cover. Two screws, circlip, change the sprocket. That looks as if it's been welded there. Yeah. BSA is take the cover off, take the clutch and the alternator off, take the window out, then you can take a nut off, and then you can get the sprocket out. Okie doke. So what do you think? I think that will work. So really I should clean this engine up, it's nasty. And then I think what we'll do is we'll make that rear engine mount. Oh, let me do a couple of measurements here for chain line. I've got the engine centered in the frame using the well, actually that might be a bit out at the back. Whoa. Oh, that would be, it's about 3 inches from the centre line. There's the cub hub, which you remember I normally put about an inch and a half in them. That only just fits in there. That's where the sprocket goes. That sprocket is only about God. Well, that's barely 2 inches off the centre line. Can't move the engine over an inch, and because the swinging arm is so narrow, I can't Then we've got to put this up on a box so we can look at things a bit better. So let me bring a box in, we'll put it on the welding table, stand it up on the box so we can see how things fit. I thought I'd try a few measurements with some straight edges. Okay, front tube and this tube, both same size, only 1 3/8. So touching both places, the centre line is half of 1 3/8 off that. So 1 3/16 to the edge of that is the centre line. So let's think. A 60 tooth sprocket is about 12 inches. Right, so the end of the sprocket would be about here where this thing is. So if the sprocket ran there, hang on, still haven't got enough things, have we? We want the sprocket to be about there. It's going to be the width of this plus 1 3/16. Where are we? That's 1 3/8. So that's half an inch and 3/16. That's 11/16. Right. So if I add 11/16 to that, that's 3 1/8. 3 1/8 to the inside of the sprocket. Alright, just double check my measurements, and of course I was looking at the wrong end of the thing, so it's actually 2 7/8. So this this thing is 3 3/8. 3 3/8. I should do all this in metric, it'd be easier. So 3 3/8, that's 1 1/2 plus 3/16. So that's 1 11/16. Right, half of 3 is 1 1/2, which is 8/16, and then 3/16. You metric people are laughing at me, aren't you? To think I spent my entire working life working. Well, no, I had to work in metric and strange things like barrels, which is 42 US gallons. So it's not even the same as UK gallons. And long tons and short tons and pound. Anyway, so we know roughly how far from this to what I think is more or less the centre line of the engine. So from there to the inside of the sprocket, I would say, did I say the inside of the sprocket? Yes. You people have got to keep me right, you know, is going to be 1 5/8. 1 5/8, which is 1 10/16 plus 1 11/16. That's 2 21/16, which is 3 5/16. All right. So this is further out than it will be on the wheel. by an 1/8 and 5/16. That's by 7/16. So we're almost half an inch. And we'd have to move it. Hang on. We'd have to move the engine that way to move the sprocket in. Which is really going to, because there's virtually no weight on this side. Clutch and everything is on that side. Oh, starting to have second thoughts about this. Alright, I thought of something else to take into account before I make a final decision. The weight. £78. It's actually a couple of pound lighter than a 250 BSA. So that's not a problem. Well, we have one. Well, oh, my mouth stopped working. We have had one piece of good luck. This is the spindle out of the swinging arm that came with the, so this is the spindle that came with the bike. It's the right size for the cub hub, except for the fact that the cub wheel spindle steps down at the end for that. So what we're going to have to do is take this, open this out a little bit to slide onto there. That's nothing. So let me slap that in the lathe and just run the right size drill bit through it. Alright, so as you can see, the speedometer and everything on this side threw me off a little bit. But now I've got this in with it set up, so I reckon that there's enough space on this side for the sprocket. We definitely do need to widen that. And but we've done that often enough. And again, it's, you know, it's an 1.5 inches or so, 1.75 inches. So I've put that in. I've got this clamped up against the where the sprocket bolts on, and as I say, I've got it placed so that there's enough clearance here for about a 60-tooth sprocket, maybe slightly bigger, to miss the swinging arm. And where did I say, what was my measurements? 2 7/8, the way we were measuring before. Yep. That's right, 2 7/8 to the inside of the sprocket. Gives us about 5/16 that the engine would have to be over. Alright, I'm going to go and have some scran. Right, I've had my lunch. It was leftover beef stew that I dipped bread in. So while I was having lunch, I was thinking, which can get messy, eating and thinking at the same time. And I've had a thought. So I've set this up now. Right, it's raised up, I think 1 inch there. What have we got here? 1/2, 1, 1.5, 1 7/8. That's a 13-inch. Or the metric equivalent, which is slightly more than 13-inch rear suspension unit. That's set at basically 24 degrees, which is what I'm always looking for. From the top of here, going down to there, to what we assume is going to be, this, as I say, is going to be sort of wheel spindle height, which it is back here, that's just nice, is 28 degrees. I've just been out and measured the B44. That's 28 degrees from the top of here, top of the headstock, to the wheel spindle. So that is basically how it would be if it was standing on wheels, everything right, with those BSA forks in. Now, I've had second thoughts about using the Honda engine, partly because of having to move the engine that way, which I think is really going to overbalance it. I know it's only 5/16 or thereabouts, but the trouble is we're moving that carburettor out, and the carburettor is very high, very pokey out. So what I've done is been out to the shed. I've got all the necessary bits and pieces. For the good old Visa 250. I'm thinking I might fit this, and what I'm also thinking is, over there on the shelf, I still have 2 cylinder liners and pistons out of an FJ 1100, which is what I use to bump these up to 300cc. So if this will fit, I think we'll put this in. Then we have our brake pedal and gear change lever on opposite sides, which I personally like, and they're not fouling each other. We can put a good old Electrics World ignition on it. I think we'll put an OKO carb on this one. Actually, I have an OKO carb on the other 300 and it works really well. So let me see if I can finagle this. I've just measured. We're a little tight on the height, but we've got plenty of room front to back. And I measured the other one from basically the centre of the engine to the inside of the sprocket. If we take that as being about central to the inside of the sprocket. Sorry about that, battery clicked off then. Excuse me. But what I was saying was from the inside of the sprocket to basically the centre, inside the sprocket's about there on this one. Two inches. And we wanted what? No, we wanted 2 7/8. So actually that wants to come over this way a bit. Well, no, because now I don't have to have the sprocket as, yeah, I can, if this will fit in, I think this would be a better engine. Well, not necessarily a better engine, but a better project. Right, so let me, as I say, finagle it into there. Well, it fits like that. Just been measuring other bikes. The Greebser, which to me looks absolutely great, has got 12 inches of ground clearance, right? So we could drop this another ½ inch. I'd really like to put forks and wheels in this to get the engine in and see what's what. Well, we could put if I put forks in, we can get it up on those stands I made, those axle stands, the ones that go into the wheel spindles, that are the right height to set the wheels where they would be. So all I need to do is put the front forks in here and put that wheel spindle in the back, forks with a wheel spindle, and I can set it on them, and then we could work with this. But that is the way we're going to go. There's not much clearance here, but it does clear it. And again, we're in that situation where we're not going to have bottom tubes. So to take this engine out, we take the bash plate off and it'll go down and come out easily. that, I think, is the trick. Makes getting the ignition easier, getting the carburetor easier, getting the chain line easier. With the engine's £2 heavier. All right, can't be helped. But and as I say, we can, for something else to do, because the other one runs really nicely and is still running with its new owner. We could do this out to 300. Hang on, I'll be back in a second. For those of you who, excuse me, who didn't see this, you know, this is alloy cylinder, it was a cast iron liner. Did a lot of measurements when I did the first project with this, and there's just nicely enough room to take that liner out, bore the barrel a little bit more, put this liner in out of an FJ 1100. This piston, and this piston has got enough thickness up here that I can mill a little bit off the top of that. I made a jig because this is 18mm. Hang on, let me switch you off. I'll tell you this now. This engine has an alloy conrod. It doesn't have a bush in the small end eye. But it's, I think, 17mm, whereas this is 18mm. So, because the first one I didn't want to strip all the engine to do it, I actually made this little jig thing up. So, that is 17mm at this end, 18 at this end. So I clamp this around the conrod, slide that in, and that goes in the little end eye. That lines everything up, clamp it all up, pull this out, and because this is 18mm, this is a guide for the reamer to go in, and I have a suitable reamer, and I just ream the alloy out to take the new pin. So anyway, I think that is what we are going to do. So I think the first thing for us to do is that little repair on that plate, and we'll fit forks because there'll probably be some work to do there. This is made to tape a roll of bearings, I think 1 3/4 inches. Yep. So that's a standard size bearing. I can get it at the old Tractor Supply place on Friday. I don't know what size the inner race is on them. The 2-inch one, the inner race is 1 inch. So if they're using the same size rollers and everything, I guess it's going to be 3/4 inch. So we'll just check. Might have to make a new fork stem up. But anyway, I'm not quite so confused. We know what we're going to do. I've got a bunch of other stuff for this. I'm not sure what. This is the earlier, it's actually a C25, which is like a Starfire engine. The quickest way to identify them is if you look at the rear engine mounting on these, it's I think 1 inch wide. Then later on, they've actually changed the size of the crankcase mouth as well, or the base of the cylinder. They made the base of the cylinder slightly bigger. But the rear mount is about 2 inches wide. Okay, so let's get stuff cleared away. See, that rotted off completely. Right, so we'll get that off, we'll get the other couple of bits off and get that repair done. Now, I've got a problem already, just as I started to clear up. As I say, this frame was for Bultaco, and a Bultaco is a 2-stroke. So being a 2-stroke, carburetor feeds in at the bottom of the cylinder. The carburetor is down here, not up here. Might not be able to fit a 4-stroke in this at all. Oh, bugger. Bugger, bugger, bugger! And that is something I just don't see how I can get round. I mean, it's pointing up, I can make it point out. You know, I can always cut this off and weld it on again. Hang on. Right. Just grab the concentric out of the box. Now an OKO is about 1/2 inch shorter. I think I've mentioned before, I don't like frames with seat pillars. They might be simpler to make. If I am going to drop this down another 1/2 inch, I don't know if you can see there, we're about touching the frame, and we're about a 1/2 inch below those bolt holes. So like that, the OKO would just fit on. If I drop it a 1/2 inch, the engine a 1/2 inch, as I say, if I've got 13 inches of ground clearance, I'll be happy with 12. I could drop this an inch. Yeah, no, I can get it to work. I can get it to work. Of course, the next thing is going to be an airbox again. But no, we'll get that to work. Let me get things moved and decide which forks we're going to use. Well, which yokes we're going to use. In fact, hold on a second again. Just so happens I didn't have to go rummaging in the shed for yokes. Yeah. Those yokes will fit. Again, we're adding a bit of weight because the top one isn't alloy. But I think they would fit with minimal work. What was I saying? I think the stem needs to be inch and a half or an inch and 3/4 of an inch. I think that's more than that. Yeah, that's an inch. Got to look in the book, see if there's a inch and 3/4 to inch. Of course, I could always fit in. I'd have to measure. See if I can put an ordinary ball race in top and bottom. Let me go and check on that. Right, so I was putting the video in last night and I noticed we've basically got plenty for this week. So what we'll do is I'll get a few things ready, like I'll get this engine all cleaned off and take the crank out, so we've just got the bare bones to make it easy to manhandle, and we'll start the project properly next week. Okay. One thing I will mention is I measured for these bearings, because you know I want to put the forks in, and they're a weird size, 45mm or 1 49/64. Because here, I don't know if you can in the UK, but you can get bearings in 64th inch increments. because they do not like metric. So I went through the catalogues, and the couple of catalogues I have, I couldn't find any. I even looked at the type of roller bearing, roller bearing, ball bearing, I can't remember the name of them, but they're designed to take axial loads as well as radial loads. Although actually Norton Commandos had a ball bearing, just a plain ball bearing, like a wheel bearing, top and bottom. So anyway, I couldn't find any, and then I thought, wait a minute, late 60s, British, slightly odd size, and I thought about the ones for the oil and frame bases, which are slightly odd. So I had a couple of old ones, and sure enough, they're going to fit. Now they are actually the Timken, they're LM11910, and I know in the past I've had trouble sourcing them, but if I get them from British Cycle Supply, which who gets them from the UK, then I can get them alright. So let's say I've got a couple of old ones, so we'll just get those in to get things going. The ID is smaller than this, so we're going to have to make a new stem. But anyway, I don't want to blather on, because as I say, we've got plenty of video. So until next week, you all stay safe and enjoy yourselves.